Okay, can you introduce yourself to
I can. My name is Allen Flynt, and I am currently a general manager and vice president of a space and defense business for United Technologies.
Okay, so what was your job at NASA, and how long did you work there for?
Okay, I worked at NASA for 21 years, and I had a number of positions while I was at NASA. The three most recent, probably most significant roles I had were the director of the EVA Management Office, which is the organization that's responsible for the spacesuits and the spacewalk activities. I was the deputy center director at Ames Research Center, and then I came back from California and took on the responsibility of being the director of mission operations for my last 3 or 4 years.
Okay, what was it like to be the director of mission control?
Really neat job. The best job I've ever had, and the best job that I thought I could ever have at NASA, which was actually part of the reason I decided to go into industry, because I couldn't imagine doing anything else at NASA that would compare to that. And it was a very busy time when I was there. We were assembling the International Space Station, utilizing the space shuttle to carry the space station elements up there. We had 1 year when I was the director where we flew 9 shuttle missions in a year, in a 12-month time period, which is the most ever that we had done. And so it seemed like every day there was something going on. I mean, we had people on orbit on the International Space Station, so we were at crews on orbit operating that and flying space shuttle missions to continue the assembly.
Okay. So what is your job now? I know you've already told us, but basically.
Sure. So, but like I said, I am responsible for leading and managing a space and defense business. We do a lot of work with NASA and other companies that do work with NASA. We're involved with the spacesuit. That's our responsibility to maintain that. We designed and built it, and we support NASA in its operation. And we provide a lot of hardware to different spacecraft that provide the environmental control and life support capability on those spacecraft. And then I have in other parts of the business, I've got 4 sites around the country that do different work. And other parts of the business do work with the Navy and the Army and Missile Defense Agency, providing similar capabilities to those organizations.
Okay, so if you had to make an estimate, how many people would you say worked at Johnson Space Center before the shutdown?
Well, we had around 3,500 people that were employed by the U.S. government, and there was another probably 8,000 to 10,000 that were in the contractors in industry working alongside the civil servants. So, somewhere between, I'd say 11 to 14,000 employees.
Okay, so while you were at NASA, did you ever do any community days to outreach? We do.
NASA would do different activities associated with organizations in the community as an entire NASA center. And then there would be other organizations like Mission Operations or Engineering Directorate that would also be involved on their own. So they would establish their own relationships in some ways with the community. So things that you'd be familiar with, like Habitat for Humanity.
Okay. So what impacts would you say that NASA Johnson Space Center had on the Clear Lake area?
Well, I think it's very significant. I think the Clear Lake area in large part is a product of NASA. If you go back in the early 60s before the center was built, it was land used for running cattle and rice farms and things of that nature. And once it's called the Manned Space Flight Center, I think at that point in time was established, then you needed the support structure for everybody that was going to be working there. So, things like restaurants, so people go out and get lunch or dinner, and then you had housing, apartments and homes that were being built in the area. In fact, Nassau Bay right here where we're at was where some of the first homes were built and where a lot of the astronauts and other people that worked at the Johnson Space Center lived.
Okay, so how do you feel that NASA altered Clear Lake's economy with Space Center Houston and Johnson Space Center?
Yeah, well, so with Johnson Space Center, again, I think everything, the original infrastructure and most of everything that was here was established to support the Johnson Space Center, and so obviously that's a huge impact on the area. I think what the Space Center Houston does now is provide a better look at what goes on at Johnson Space Center, a better insight into the science and the technology that's behind it, as well as human interest activities. They're prior to the Space Center Houston, the only opportunity you had was you'd go on site and tour around some of the facilities, but there weren't the same interactive opportunities that you have at Space Center Houston. So I think the other thing is the government didn't really promote NASA as a place for tourism, and people came and people knew about NASA, but Space Center Houston does a good job of advertising and promoting that. So I think they've had an additional impact on the community as well by bringing in more tourists.
So how many people were laid off with the shutdown of the space shuttle program at Johnson Space Center?
Gosh, probably I know it was on thousands of people. My organization, previous organization, Mission Operations, I know laid off over 1,000 people, I think, just out of that organization. I think the United Space Alliance, which was a significant contractor with NASA on the space shuttle program, had several thousand people working for them. So I'm guessing it was more than 3,000 and maybe as high as 6,000.
Okay, so how do you feel that the shutdown has altered the economy and community of Clear Lake?
Well, I think when they retired the space shuttle, as I said, there were a lot of people that were laid off. Now, some of those people went to other industries and stayed in the area, didn't relocate, so they went to the oil and gas industry or the petrochemical industry. But you did have people relocating and moving. I can remember back just a few years ago, quite a number of homes that were for sale. So I think it had an impact, people moving out. Obviously that means there are less people going to restaurants for lunch or dinner. And even people that stayed in the area, of course, if they're commuting to the other side of town, they're not here during the business hours. So even though they may not have relocated, there's not as much business for the restaurants and the retailers. And so I think you've seen some restaurants close down. There's certainly, if you go into places at lunch around here, it's not as crowded as it used to be. So I think there's a number of businesses that have struggled with the retirement of the space shuttle.
Do you feel that the shutdown has affected the number of visitors to Space Center Houston at all?
No, I don't know that I've noticed a change with the number of visitors to Space Center Houston. I think NASA is still in the mind of the public, even though we're not flying the shuttle, which was very visible. I do think we missed that, and that has the potential to have an impact on the number of visitors in the future. But my general sense is there's still an awareness of NASA and an interest in going to visit Space Center Houston and learn more about it, see things that they can't see in, wherever they're living.
Mm-hmm. Okay, how does it make you feel that Johnson Space Center did not get one of the real space shuttles, but instead got the mock-up?
Well, I think I'm like everybody, or most everybody in the community. They're very disappointed and believe that it was a politically motivated decision. And if you think about the Johnson Space Center as well as the Marshall Space Flight Center and the Kennedy Space Center, those were the three key contributors to the space shuttle program. The space shuttle program office and all the people that help manage and operate the space shuttle or were here in Houston. Mission operations, which had a significant role, obviously, with mission control and the execution of the flights. The astronaut corps is here. The engineering directorate, which you go back into the early 70s when the space shuttle was being developed. A lot of people working here at the Johnson Space Center had a significant role in that. So, clearly Johnson Space Center, I think, had one of the, if not the most significant role in the space shuttle program. And for Houston not to be rewarded or recognized for their role in that, I think is really unfortunate and was not the right decision.
Mm-hmm. Okay, last question. How do you think NASA's impact on the community before the shutdown compares to its role in Clear Lake after the shutdown?
I think historically NASA has had more of an impact on the community than it does today. One of the things that's a positive for the Clear Lake area is it's become more diversified in terms of the industries that are in the area that employ the people. So there's a lot of people like your dad that work in the oil and gas or petrochemical industry. There are a lot of people that work in the medical industry that live in this area. I think as this area has grown in popularity with its proximity to the water, there are a lot of people that commute back and forth into Houston. I don't think it used to be that way as much, and I think that's healthy for the area. So I would say historically NASA's had more of an impact on the area, and as funding at NASA or programs at NASA came and went, you would see fluctuations in the local economy more so than you do today. With that said, it's still a large industry in the area. There's still a lot of people that are employed through the aerospace industry, and so I think it still impacts it. And as programs will come and go, you'll see an impact on the area, but not as much as you would have seen maybe 20 or 30 years ago.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.